how do you quantify what is a good muscle mass?
How I look in the mirror, but
All right, episode 7. We have no idea what we're gonna talk about, but it's gonna be legendary. That's the promise. That is the
always.
only promise. All right, so we're gonna split into two parts here. I think Evan's gonna go first, and he is gonna look at my notes. He's gonna talk about the next chapter in the book, nutrition focus, and then I'll talk about some of the sexy stuff like calcium scores, and it's so fascinating. All right, let's get started.
All right, so I think I'm kind of skipping some chapters in a way, but those chapters in between the last ones are a little, um, they're kind of overarching ideas. Anyways, I think chapter 14 talks about diet, but chapter 15 goes into more specifics, so I'll just touch on that.
Yeah.
Um, and anybody who listens to him knows that he kind of has three ways. Number one, he hates diet. He hates the word diet. He's asked
Peter
about it.
Tia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently, he must have gone down the rabbit hole for several years of diet and whether he did research on it or not. He got into the research,
Do you think he got
into the
burned out
literature.
because of lack of like evidence and consensus?
Right. He got burned out of the fact that you just can't study it well. There's just humans are poor
Oh,
subjects for dietary studies.
for social legal purposes, you can't create the perfect study.
In a way,
Just
but just that
mm,
humans left to their own devices, yeah, they're not going to follow your directions. And
yeah,
you would have to do it over such a long period of time. You're just not going to get somebody, oh, you're going to eat a Happy Meal every day for 20 years and
yeah.
the other person's not. Like, that's just not going to ever happen.
So a lot of the evidence is like observational studies, which and self-reported studies, which is like the lowest level of evidence you can have. So it's hard to make strong, life-changing, practice-changing recommendations and tell people, So I understand that part.
Yeah, so many co-founders,
Confounding variables.
confounders. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so that's to begin with, but he calls it. So he says, I'm not going to call it diet. I'm going to call it nutritional biochemistry, which goes into the way he thinks about almost everything, which is what can we scientifically understand about food intake. If we break it down into the macronutrients, what can science really say with some level of confidence? So that's kind of how he thinks about it.
Just for the um, awe factor, I am going to share this highly studied and accepted food pyramid that
Look at
says
all
at the
that
top,
bread.
yeah, the bread, pasta, and the crackers, which is the core of what humans need, is like the bottom 6 to 11 servings. It must be weekly. And then at the top, fats, oils, very little, and then vegetables. But yeah, no fat, lots of carb, because fat is bad. It has cholesterol.
Probably has nothing to do with our current obesity epidemic. This food
Nah.
pyramid.
So all right, just wanted to get
Yeah,
that out.
and to be fair, you and I talk about getting somebody on, like a lay person who's medically literate in a way, or at least health conscious, and let's talk about what it is that medicine is missing, because I think there's a lot of skepticism towards Western medicine, and a lot of it is related to nutrition. And I think there's some fairness in that, because we just aren't in medical school. We just don't learn much about nutrition, you
Yeah,
know. And he kind of talks about that in the book. Is If somebody comes in with, I've got diabetes, I've got high blood pressure, you're pretty specific. You're saying you're going to start metformin, 500 milligrams, whatever. You're going to start lisinopril, 20 milligrams, whatever. If you said what is your normal spiel, you should eat fruits and vegetables. Like, a diet is so non-specific. You're just like, you should eat a varied diet. Maybe you'll say you should eat 25 to 35 grams of fiber. That's a little specific, but I don't know
It
about
doesn't really
you,
mean
but
anything to like, like when you look at food, it doesn't tell you how much fiber it has.
right. I don't
So,
know.
so
How do
you're
you feel about that? Like the fact that we don't really prescribe the food.
That's true. Imagine if like lisinopril, which is a medication for blood pressure, if I was like, take, 40 milligrams of lisinopril, but then you have to like figure if it was like in food, you have to figure out what foods to eat to get that much. I mean, that's like extra homework. That's inconsistent, and you could then go to subscribe to places that kind of pack it up to you nicely, but then you fall for overly processed. Like, hey, you need to eat this many grams of carbs, and now you're buying packaged goods that are probably processed because in order to have a certainty about how many grams of carbs it has, you kind of have to break it down to the lowest sugars, and then kind of that'll be the easiest way. Like, here, you get your grams. Otherwise, it's estimating. I've heard like diabetics are can be really good because because they get the feedback. Their body responds with insulin or the sugar spikes, and then they have to. So I feel like you can learn that, but I guess they're cheating because they can actually, learn because every time they're wrong, their body will tell them, "Hey, that was actually very, sugar heavy or carb heavy load that you just gave me." So, but maybe that if so, that could be one way you could just measure your sugar and see. But I agree, it is very difficult in doctor's office, and but I also think generally like a lot of times doctors don't want to spend a lot of time on diet because especially today, I mean, I feel like people know. I mean, that's the argument. People know what is healthy. People know what is unhealthy. I think today's day, if someone's like, "Oh, I didn't know sodas are bad for you," I mean, it's hard to believe that person genuinely did not know that drinking Coca Cola 3 times a day and eating McDonald's is a good diet. I mean, I just don't buy it. I think these are not super conspiracy theories type stuff they were talking about. Everybody should know Coca Cola is bad or sodas are bad for you. Some people don't know, like, they still think apple juice or orange juice is the healthy thing and they give their kids that. But I mean, we know it's also, you know, a lot of added sugar in a lot of these things and they're technically processed. So that part I can believe. But I see a lot of patients that are super obese with a lot of diabetes, but they're still on the sodas. I mean, and they know they're not supposed to, but they just struggle with that change. So yeah, that's why Ozempic is so good because everybody knows. Everybody's so happy. They're like, "Oh, I don't have to eat." I mean, there's a sign of relief. Nobody's
Right.
like, "Oh man, I want to quit Ozempic because I can't drink my sodas." No, like they're grateful. Like, I don't eat bad food anymore. This is incredible. So,
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on. I mean, he went into probably the most scientific you can get is to have a continuous glucose monitor,
oh yeah,
and I think this is a great idea, and it kind of fits into his medicine 3.0 approach in that you can moment by moment see what any food will do to your blood sugar. And if you drink that soda, or you eat an orange, or you have oatmeal, or whatever it is, it's instant feedback. And it will show you at times of the day, even during the night, what's going on based off your level of stress and other factors such as cortisol. And I think it's I think that's Obviously, I think they're only. I think anybody could get one with a prescription, but I think you tell me if I'm wrong, but um, it's really not something that most doctors would prescribe to somebody who's metabolically healthy.
I'll tell you what, I think most doctors would be curious to get it themselves, just from a curious mind education standpoint. At least the doctors I talk to, because I'm maybe in a bubble of people who think about this kind of stuff a lot. Um,
Well, I was going to ask you to
so
prescribe me one, so yeah.
I probably could, or I think you could also like go to other countries, and I think you have much easier
I
access.
think there are some websites that will do it for you. Like they basically have a doctor on staff that will do
Yeah,
the
so
prescription.
I think the good sides are clear. You get to have some data in your life about your diet that you never had before, and and you get to, I've heard through internet forums that it's actually enlightening. I mean, people, and you don't even know, like you may think some whatever food is giving you a big spike. It has shock value because maybe you were not expecting that spike to be there, but you still don't know what that means. I mean, that's the danger, right? Like, oh, I had a spike. Like, am I not supposed to eat that? Is every spike bad? Like, so that's the I guess danger. But I think just from data is beautiful. Let's look at my data. I'm not gonna obsess over it. I'm just gonna learn it and respect it. I think it's great. Um, the only downside is I think it's just expensive. It's like hundreds of dollars a month. Um, People I've talked to have done it, do it for a month or two, and I think that's enough for them to learn the lessons, and they don't, So it's really about giving you that first insight, and then you don't really have to use it. So, and there are companies. I mean, this is not sponsored, but I mean, Levels is something that shows up on my searches now. I think they target me because of my searches. And ultimately, there are only two big companies. Even Levels works with Dexcom, which is primarily, I don't even know if they make their products, that company. It's like a $50 billion company or so. And then Abbott, I think, makes the Freestyle Libra. And I think a similar kind of method where it estimates what your blood glucose is, which is what we worry about, by by measuring your non-blood glucose that sits between the cells. So glucose kind of leaks out of the blood, and the capillaries kind of sits just underneath the top surface of the skin, and it kind of it can measure it. I don't really understand beyond that how it technically works. We're just able to sample that interstitial fluid and give you a reading. And yes, it's not 100% accurate, but I think it's pretty good for what it is. Only people that should really worry about its accuracy are at least probably people who are actually taking insulin, and there's actually a risk of low blood sugars, which can be very dangerous. But if you're a type of person who's curious about their blood sugars, I think it's fine. I've heard like if you have a huge spike, it can get uncalibrated, um, which may be true. So you may still need to have a physical kind of like old school where you poke your fingertip and measure it manually. That's the accurate reading, and then you can adjust it. But yeah, if it was free, I don't know why everybody would do it whenever a certain person hits that time of their life where they start thinking about their health. It could be even teenagers. I think it's a great tool to use. I, they're always coming out with new ones, but I don't know why it's so expensive. I feel like it shouldn't be that expensive. I mean, I don't, whatever they do, I feel like they could probably do it for cheaper. Though I don't know. You know,
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that number somewhere between $100 and $200 a month.
yeah,
Um,
and I'm thinking Freestyle Libra made by Abbott is the cheaper one. I think because it doesn't have a. I think it just has the sensor that goes on your arm, and then it just talks to your phone, so it doesn't have that reader. But it's not cheaper by a whole lot. So, but yeah, one day
well,
I'll do it.
I think it's I think it's a way to game the system, and he talks about that.
What do you
Essentially,
mean?
you know what's going to cause a spike. If the goal is, I mean, I think it's, and he talks about, and I agree. I want you to be under the average glucose to be under 100, and I don't want the deviation to be more than 20 or something, standard deviation. Um, so if you know what's going to give you those spikes, then you can avoid those foods. And you know the time, like, the timing matters of when you eat. Um, so I think it's a way for you to achieve a lower average blood glucose by knowing when to eat what. You know.
Yeah, and I think it can only. I always think of basically what I'm trying to say is I think it's a lot more clever. It's a lot more data. It's not just sugar, but it actually gives you an insight into your blood insulin levels based on how your body responds to a carb load by the quickness of a peak and how quickly it declines, how smoothly and efficiently your body is able to use its intrinsic the insulin it makes to control and keep the sugars at a good level. So that's also a great insight. So I agree. And I know some big. I think Google was trying to work on like a contact lens that could similarly sample your tears for glucose, and it would be like just close enough to the blood glucose. But
Hmm.
I don't think that turned into a product.
Okay.
But I'm hoping they're continuing to work out there. Somebody is. Yeah.
Well, so he espouses three ways to think about diet, and that would
Hmm.
be calorie restriction or calorie counting, dietary restriction, where you're essentially not eating certain foods, and then time restriction. So the calorie counting would, in my opinion, would be probably the hardest because you have to basically know everything that you're eating and count them every day. I think that would be hard to do for one day. I've never done that in my life. Um, the dietary restriction, a little bit easier because you can just say, I'm not going to eat, for me, like, I'm not going to eat Oreos at night. I'm not going to eat, or you can like make it broader. I'm not going to eat sugars, or like I'm going to be on a keto diet, something like this. So it can go from very narrow to broad. And then the time restricted seems like the easiest. You know, I'm only going to eat between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. or something like this.
Yeah.
All in all, it's like you're just trying to decrease energy intake at the end of the day. And I agree with that model. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, time you can't misunderstand unless your clock is broken, right? Like if you're saying, "Well, I'm gonna eat whatever between this time and not eat on the other times," that's easy to prescribe, easy to recommend. I think it is tricky to be like, I'm not going to, eat certain fats or certain carbs in terms of calorie restriction. Though my favorite of calorie restriction is create a blacklist of foods and start with the lowest hanging fruit or food, which depending. I mean, if you're very obese, kind of already in at the bottom of metabolic syndrome, that's easy. I mean, you got to be drinking your sugars. So just forget about everything else. Forget about time. Just don't drink sodas. Don't drink juices. Don't drink your sweet iced tea. And let's just start there. And but if you are, on the fitness longevity spectrum of people who think about their health, that's harder to prescribe. I think it becomes a lot more nuance, and now we are going into how different people with the different genetics respond to different foods, and it's hard to make blanket recommendations. But I think that's where the glucose monitor like the CGMs can be your guide on, if you're trying to reduce glucose spikes. And the first one where you was well, you don't know how many calories you're eating. So I think there's like an idea for a great startup. You know, like if images can detect people, and now AI can create images, surely you should be able to take a picture of a food and it should be able to guess, not perfectly, but you know pretty accurately on what you're about to, what the calorie content is. Probably you probably need to have a database, and something like MyFitnessPal. I don't know if they do that, but I mean that's already a popular app. They should include that kind of stuff in there because that would be very helpful to people. And I think it's not a difficult project because I'm a pro AI person. I think AI is super smart, so I think they could actually be very valuable and an actually helpful tool if someone could create, basically take a picture of your food and magically give you kind of caloric breakdown, carbs, maybe simple carbs, complex carbs. And I understand this is the estimate, and I'll be curious to kind of correlate that with if you're wearing a CGM, the glucose monitor, if it's accurate. That'd be cool. But yeah, those are my
Yeah, it
thoughts.
seems like seems doable, and it. I mean, he talks. I think in his podcast, he talks with this. I think the bodybuilder community is essentially, when it comes to calorie counting, they're like the experts in this because
Oh,
they're they're so they know so much about what they eat. It affects their form, I guess. But
but
he
how do
said
they
he.
know for sure? Do they actually wear CGMs?
I don't know. Well, I'm not, probably not most of them, but they're always checking the boxes. They're just they're counting calories constantly because it affects their performance and their weight, and at least,
Yeah.
I mean, at least according to the ones that he's talked to on his show, to the
So
point
just
where he was one of them he was talking to. He was like, "Yeah, I got to the end of the day. I knew I had about 400 calories left, and I had this brownie. I didn't know the brand of the brownie or whatever. I just knew that the size, this is going to be about X amount of calories, and whether I can eat it or not." I mean, I think that's probably how into that game that they are. So I
maybe
guess it's
because
possible.
maybe because they're so mindful. At first, I thought they were just eating protein all day, and that's easy way to kind of like
Right, right,
yeah.
yeah,
But sounds like maybe they're just so in tune. They're so focused on what they're eating and what their performance is. That's all they think about 24/7. Then
right,
maybe you do build that intuition on what is what you're about to eat, which is kind of
right.
cool. I wish more
And so I
people
think
could
you,
learn that.
if a human can do it, then certainly a computer could do it.
Yeah, and if a human can do it, surely other humans can do
Right. Well, I could say I would never want to do
it. Yeah,
that. I
sounds
mean, I
like a
would
lot.
never want to count calories for a day, much less a week or a month. Sounds
Yeah,
terrible.
and I mean, but
Uh,
here, I mean, you could also like just train the model by collecting data on getting like I don't know, 100 bodybuilders splitting food, and be like, how many calories do you think that is? And just like see if they're all in the ballpark and like put that number,
right.
and then you
Yeah.
could train something like that. Interesting.
He talks about, or he writes about monkey studies, two monkey studies, one out of Wisconsin, one out of the NIH,
Hmm.
in relation to fasting. So we could talk a little bit about fasting. Essentially, the Wisconsin study took these had calorie or fasted one group and didn't fast the other group, basically ad libitum eating, and they showed an extended, statistically significant increase in lifespan for those monkeys.
So what is ad
That
libitum eating?
just add, I mean,
As your
whatever they
brain
want,
desires. Okay.
as you desire,
And what's the
and
difference between the two groups?
the content of the food was no different,
Okay.
but or the makeup of the food was no different. It was just not. It was restricted in one group, so they fasted them, and I don't remember how long they fasted them,
So it's a time kind of thing, the time restriction
but
phenomena.
more than just 16-hour fast. I think it was more of like a multi-day fast type of thing, or
Oh, so either they're kind of starving, but when they're eating, they can eat the same thing.
I may or may not be right. I don't remember the details of that,
Yeah.
but one
Okay.
group was fasted in some way and one group wasn't. And they
Okay.
essentially, what they look like at the end of their
Hmm.
lives, number one, the fasted monkeys lived longer and they looked healthier. And by all metrics, they were healthier at the end of their lives. Um, Whereas the NIH study, which came out later, they did the same thing and found no difference. So there was a lot of hope that fasting was going to be a key to longevity. And if you look at the details, what Atia's explanation for this is the Wisconsin study, monkeys were fed off the shelf monkey chow, which was like 28% sucrose by weight.
That's a
Um,
lot of
the
sugar.
the NA the NI yeah, and 40% of those 40% of the let's see, 40% of control monkeys developed insulin resistance, whereas in the NIH group, so the control monkeys being the ad libitum group, the NIH group only 14% did, and that was because they were fed by this primatologist, this very a much better diet, much more to what probably a human would eat.
So if you're saying fasting is good if you're on the soda every day diet, but
Right,
if you're like I'm gonna think about what I put in my body, then it's a lot more complicated.
right. And that's his takeaway was basically fasting would be good for metabolically unhealthy people. That's one
And
takeaway.
but anything will be good in somebody who is basically on the most terrible diet, which is kind of
But
good. That
I,
means it's easy to actually take good actions and improve, which is kind of encouraging if you can actually realize that you're getting better. You know.
but I think that I mean, I take my takeaway. I agree with him. Surprise, surprise. Um,
To your boy.
is that the he basically he used to fast. He used to do a quarterly, week long fast, more or
Yeah.
less, and he in a monthly 3-day fast. He no longer does the quarterly fast because during that week long fast he would lose a large or a certain percentage of lean body mass, and he believes that any benefit you may gain in longevity with fasting would be lost to longevity with poor muscle mass,
Muscle man.
not being able to have enough muscle mass as you age. So, um, given those restrictions, so he no longer fasts like he used to, and he wouldn't fast like these monkeys were fasted. So, what can you take away then? I think if you have a diabetic and they need to get on the right path, I think a good start would be, somebody who has uncontrolled diabetes would be to do some sort of multi-day fast to try to get them set up on the right way. What are your thoughts on that?
So I learned about all this kind of stuff in residency through YouTube. I think Jason Fung might have been like one of the first. I think I read his book in residency, and it was kind of made me think about some of the other things, especially insulin resistance. And he's a big fast guy, huge fast guy, and it makes perfect sense. And I think what we have discussed so far today actually now makes a lot more sense to me too, because I I respect both Peter Attia and Jason Fong, and I think, and obviously Jason Fong is fast, fast, fast. Peter Attia is muscle is a lot more important, but the thing is they both focus on completely different populations. Peter Attia focusing on the longevity people like you, Evan, who are healthy already. They want to be healthier. They want to be healthier than anybody has been, healthy. They want to be the 110th percentile, which is not even possible. And Jason Fung is working with diabetics. He's like, you can reverse your diabetes. You can
Right.
reverse your insulin resistance. So I think they're both right. So, which makes sense. I mean, if you have diabetes and you don't know where to start, you're like, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. It is hard. I don't know. Make a support group and fast for a day, or I mean, start with a few hours, extend it to a day, extend it to I don't know, more than a day. Cut out the easy things. I would still recommend. To me, it makes more sense to just not drink sodas. And how do you not drink sodas? Don't buy sodas. Like if you don't have them in your house, it's unhealthy food in general. You're not gonna, you know, consume them. To me, that's even my intuition says that's gonna give you a lot more quick benefit without changing your diet drastically. To me, fasting will be extremely painful. If they can accomplish it, great. But I think either thing will be better than no making no change in
Well,
that
people who
very
have
unhealthy population specifically.
people who have I don't know if I've done, in residency I probably fasted for a day, maybe not, but like definitely went a long time without
Yeah,
eating just because
yeah,
of the nature of the job. But people who have fasted, I mean, after a certain point, they say you stop feeling hungry. So
yeah. But it's so much when you have high insulin levels. It is. I don't think I understand what that brain feels like to have high insulin levels. Plus, a lot of people who are already diabetic, morbidly obese, they are on insulin. So they have been prescribed a lifestyle of eating a certain amount of carbs and taking a certain amount of insulin, multiple times a day. So it's been ritualized over months to years. So it's so much harder to fight that where you're actually fighting your body at a hormonal level. But if you have no insulin or very little insulin resistance or you're insulin sensitive, I think fasting is just a lot more easier. I mean, there
mm.
you always have the people who like to snack. Heck, I like to snack now, which maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm bored or I'm developing some insulin resistance.
Well, to kind of wrap up this chapter, so that we kind of covered carbohydrates pretty well.
Hmm.
Um,
What's your takeaway too for diet? I mean, you've consumed. We talked about how Peter Tia doesn't understand it. What is your take on what is a healthy diet?
Things that I do, so I try to eat um, try to eat lots of vegetables. Things that I do now that I probably didn't do 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Eat more vegetables. I eat meat. Protein is the one you and I probably wouldn't agree as much on that one, but so he says the recommended daily allowance is like point is a 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. In his opinion, that's way under. Like it should be two or three times that. And so I try to get I I don't succeed, but I try to get like 150 grams of protein a day, something like that. Try to break it up into four, whether that's a shake or whatever it is. So that's probably the biggest thing. I'm trying to gain muscle, um, and you have to do some resistance training to get that too. So I try to add the resistance training. And then other than that, the other, I mean, overall, I feel like I could probably improve on my fat intake. I could, um, like, I think cholesterol was, my LDL was a little high, like 102, and my ApoB was higher than I want it to be. And I think probably eating more monounsaturated fats would help change that potentially. Um, but yeah, so probably eat more olive oil, eat more avocados, eat more nuts.
But your if I'm gonna summarize what you said and tell me if I'm wrong. Your number one thing is eat tons and tons of protein, and with
Well,
resistance
not tons and
training.
tons, but not like 150 grams.
But you're saying it's hard to. Well, but you also are not a carnivore. You actually eat a lot of vegetables. So, but if you were a typical American unhealthy diet, I should say, where you're eating meat 3 times a day, maybe through fast food, they're probably getting a lot of protein.
Right, right.
So it's easy to get protein that way, but you are trying to focus on your vegetables. So why do you do vegetables? What do you think you're getting out of the vegetables? Because things you have mentioned so far being protein, you're not getting a lot of protein, and fat, you're not getting a lot of fat from these vegetables. So why are you eating all these vegetables?
Vitamins, minerals, fiber.
Okay, so that's fair. So it sounds like, would you say maybe you have just three column, maybe equally important uh, veggies for all the trace minerals and fiber and the vitamins and protein and fat, and slight preference to protein because you're really focused on having that muscle mass in your 80s so you can be as independent and live a long and healthy life.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be balanced. Yeah, I definitely, I think the way he breaks it down is, are you overnourished? Or are you undernourished? Are
Hmm.
you like over protein, or what is it? Over muscle mass or under muscle mass? And the way I think of my nutrition is, I'm probably adequately nourished, but I've always been lean. Like, I've always been probably under muscled.
How do you quantify what is a good muscle mass?
How I look in the mirror, but
It's
no,
like
I
in the
mean,
morning, you're like, all right, I think I look good. Check mark.
um, I guess in the gym, how much I can bench press, or what I could do on the machines, or whatever it is that I'm doing, how I feel in general, how strong I feel. I mean, sometimes, yeah, I guess I don't have an objective. Currently, I don't have an objective way of knowing, other than just overall, when I lift something, do I feel weak or do I feel strong? I feel like or like, even like, I think if you just take one exercise, like pull ups or push ups, being in the military, we have to do those. So, like, now I can do push ups or pull ups, but that's probably more of a result of just focusing on that one exercise. I think anybody,
Mm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't have a good objective way. I've always felt a little scrawny, and under muscled. Like, yeah, that's best I can say.
And that's the only caveat. I I think it's easy to create a quantitative thing using your own body weight because I feel like if you could come up with, hey, something easy to understand, you should be able to do, I don't know, at least 10 push-ups and 10 pull-ups and 10 burpees. Burpees maybe more cardiovascular, but basically these kind of things that I think most people can probably comprehend. I don't know what these numbers are. I just pulled these out of my hat, but I think that would be a good way to quantify. Some people do these kind of DEXA scan type situations where they'll get the
Right.
fat component but the muscle. But I don't think muscle if you cut somebody open in an anatomy lab, that they will have muscle. I don't think just the physical anatomy or having very thick muscle is actually important. It's really what you can do with it. It's
Yeah,
really because
definitely. I think that's true.
yeah. So I think it has to be a functional test. That's why I don't think some sort of a scan is going to do it. It's really your ability to get up from the ground without using your hand, or like doing the push-ups and pull-ups. So those are some of the basic squats, and you know. So I think these kind of compound exercises, I think, is a great way, and they can scale. If you're a big guy, in your old time, when you're old, you're gonna have to carry a large body, and at least a tall body. So you need more strength than somebody who is smaller. So I think that I mean, it's an idea I'm playing with, but at least that's how I try it too. I'm recently got into weight exercise, kind of resistance training. So at least that's what I'm trying to do for myself.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's what you can perform,
Yeah.
not. And so, yeah, so you're saying, and the DEXA scan's a good point, but you're arguing that maybe that's not the best way to.
because you can
to
bulk up
determine.
easily, but what's also important is those stabilizer muscles. I mean, there are so many small muscles. That's why I think free weights are so much better, in my opinion. Granted, you're not overdoing and injuring yourself than some of these, Smith's machine or something that's super kind of is going to just work on your glamour bod, and then but you actually have achieved not a lot of stability and strength.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I think
All
that's a good.
right.
Wow, we sound
All right.
so wise, like we know what we're doing. Um, all right, I think that's pretty good. I think that's how and I think mine too. I I think we're all agreeing, decrease your carb intake just because most people probably overdo it unless your your lifestyle is very heavy on, you're in construction or you're working a blue collar job where maybe you'll actually benefit from some recommended carbs in your diet. But if you're an office worker, you're mostly sitting around, writer, I don't know, even doctors. I mean, if you're standing up, even surgeons, I don't think you're moving a whole lot. But so less carbs, and obviously try to do more fat. We don't need to go into saturated, unsaturated, polyunsaturated. Those are all just variety of fats, and there's this whole thing about seed oils that I still don't fully understand. I understand the arguments that are being made about they're being unhealthy, but I haven't bought into yet. But again, that's the fat bucket, and then eat your protein. You can do plant, you can do animal, but and the reason we disagree on the protein, I just think protein without muscle wear and tear, without workout, I don't think it actually does you a lot of good. So if you just sit there, not do anything, and eat protein all day, you will get fat. You're not just gonna have super awesome muscles,
That's
and
true.
that's the caveat.
That's true.
All right, okay.
All
I
right. Let's
guess
talk about calcium
yeah.
scores.
Let's talk about calcium score. So why calcium score? Again, this is a different topic. We talked about nutrition so far. Now we're kind of pivoting into heart attacks and strokes. We had talked previously about every organ supplied by blood vessels, and when those blood vessels get blocked, whatever is downstream of the blood vessels dies. And most dramatic examples of that are brain with strokes and heart with heart attacks. We don't really have a great screening tool for stroke prevention. Some people can focus on their arteries in their neck, and that can be one of the reasons to have strokes. The strokes can come from clots from your heart, they can come from local clots, not necessarily from the neck. So, but there's a lot of interest and headway that people have made regarding heart attacks prevention. So, how do we prevent heart attack? Basically, we understand that plaques rupture and cause a clot. That's universally known, and nobody will refute that. You have a plaque, it ruptures, and you have a blood clot. And beyond that statement, we don't know a whole lot. We don't know which plaque will rupture. Will a large plaque will rupture, a young and small plaque will rupture. We just know if you have plaque, you have higher risk for plaque rupture and heart attack. Once you have had a heart attack, that's easy. We don't need all these scans. You had a heart attack, you're a person who already had a heart attack, so you can have another one because no matter what the scan tells me, screening is not needed. I know you are at risk because you had that already. But we're talking about screening. I am a concerned patient. I don't want to have a heart attack. What can I do? What should I do? What is my risk? Let's just start with that. Like, am I at risk for having a heart attack? Um, The two scans we were talking about. The first one being the calcium score, uh, coronary calcium score. All it is using X-rays to look into your arteries, heart arteries, just the arteries around the heart. It's a very focused test with a little bit of radiation, not a whole lot of radiation, and it tells you if there is calcium, which is code for do you have an old plaque, not a young plaque, but do you have an old plaque? So you can imagine, this plaque business is everybody has this going on. The only difference is the rate. If you check the hearts of every 90-year-old, I would be surprised if nobody has at least a little bit of calcium just because age is against them. They will have some of this. If they don't, great, but that's going to be rare. So most 90-year-olds, because calcium is an end stage plaque, a very old plaque, old people will have that. If a 30-year-old person who should, by regardless of their lifestyle, should be, they could be smoking, but they should be healthy at, let's say, 25, make it more dramatic. A 25-year-old should not have calcium because none of their, even if they have plaques, they should not be old plaques. But if a 25-year-old has calcium, that is scary. That is unexpected. That is accidental. That is a person who is definitely at risk for heart attacks because there is, for some reason, calcium in their coronaries. There's there because there's old plaque. That plaque probably started in when they were a teenager. So that person who doesn't have any symptoms, they were just curious because they had a maybe a parent who had a heart attack and died when in their 40s. So this person is curious and wants to know what is his risk, so they can do this. And now you you're able to screen somebody who's young, and you can tell them, hey, you looks like you have an old plaque at you're such a young age. We got to do something. And what can you do? Well, there's not a whole lot of things people can do. You gotta not smoke, um, eat well, control your lipids, maybe take a statin. At least that's the basic stuff. You can, um, making sure you don't have diabetes and all that. Then you can go deeper. But I think that's pretty much 95% of options that you can do. Live healthy lifestyle, don't smoke, and in terms of drug therapies, you can maybe take statins. I don't want to go into Repatha and some of the PCSK9 inhibitors because I don't. I mean, functionally, they all kind of do the same things, in my opinion.
So
Uh,
are you getting scans on these people, or who do they qualify to get a, if
so
they
it's
have a
another good
family history, or
question.
what who qualifies to get one?
So
Coronary calcium
who
score.
qualifies is also your scan should be meaningful. It's a very little radiation, but it needs to be meaningful. Before you do the scan, you need to have at least some hope that this person will be helped in some way. So who can be helped? If someone has average risk and they're super super young, that person does not qualify. If they're 25 and they had no crazy family history, they just want to do it because they heard it on a podcast, that is a stupid reason to do this test.
Dang it! I was going to get one.
Because most likely, I'm kind of pulling numbers out of nowhere, but 1,000 people you will do, 1,000 people will have no plaque, at least no calcified plaque. They will have no mature plaque at the age of 25. But if they have a strong family history, then that changes things. Or you can go slightly older. Let's say you are 40, 45. You're kind of going into this early middle age. Um, and then you are maybe old enough where you're not totally surprised as somebody who has no symptoms maybe has some mature plaque. And maybe they smoke, maybe they're diabetic, so they have these kind of risk factors. But now you have a reason to screen them, even though they're not having any symptoms. Does that make sense? So before test, you're kind of like, yeah, I won't be surprised if they have some calcium. I think that's a good patient to scan.
Do you know if that's if the insurance companies are covering those? If you do you have to like if you chart and say they're like do you have to hedge on your charting in order to get insurance companies to cover these or what is
So
your
I don't the good. So we actually had a big lecture about this very recently. So I don't know if insurance companies are covering it, but the good news is they're extremely cheap, like $80,
okay.
$100
Oh, okay.
cash. Just calcium score. It's super simple. You do need a doctor's order, just because that, and mainly because I don't want 20-year-olds who listen to podcasts, get this just because they want to be healthy, whatever healthy means. Um,
Are they do is it the same CT scanner as a normal CT, just a different protocol? Or
yeah,
is it a different
yeah, the coronary calcium score is not a super hi-fi scan. I
but
don't
they do
even know.
like you do them at the I'm guessing you do them at your hospital, like they're going to the same radiology department and they're not doing it some outside facility where it's like
I'm not
specialized for
correct. I'm not 100% sure like what kind of protocols, but it is not something that is super specialized. In fact, you can
hmm,
use your one of your old CTs and calculate this. You don't
gotcha.
even necessarily need to have a proper scan.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's one population. We're using the scan to decide how to treat, who to treat aggressively. You're trying to screen people who wouldn't otherwise necessarily start therapy or take lifestyle actions seriously. So this can dramatize what is going on in their heart. You kind of spook people into taking care of their body. So young people who you want to um, take strong actions because you, as a doctor, kind of see them going down the wrong path. So that's a great candidate to get this test. The other person is kind of person who has gone through this the danger zone of heart attacks. I say danger zone is 45 to 65. That's where I think a lot of the heart attacks happen. So if you're kind of early on, then you can get the test to see if you want to take medication. But if you're on the tail end, if you went 65 years of age, maybe 70, never had a heart attack, my doctor's like, maybe you want to take a statin. And you're like, I don't know. I really don't like taking medication. And I would be surprised if you don't have any mature plaque at the age of 65 or 70. But if I scan you and I don't see any, guess what? Maybe I don't need to put you on a statin. So you can take a person, so you're working on the two spectrum. A younger person who you think can benefit from medication, a strong lifestyle changes, you can screen them. And if they're positive, that positive means something. And if you take an older person who you think would have a mature plaque just because of age, and if they don't have that calcium, that negative in an old person means something, and you can actually demedicate them and free them up for $80,
Gotcha.
$100.
Makes sense.
And again, these people don't have any symptoms. These are just people living their life. They're worried about, will I have a heart attack? I've never had a heart attack. I've never had a stroke. I never had a vascular event. What is my risk? This is all screening and predicting the future, sometimes which is futile. So, what's the other thing? The other thing is the CT angiography, which is a much crazier scan. It cannot be done anywhere. You do need a CT scan. I think most CT scans actually are do meet have the capability. They're fast. They can catch quick slices. You do need to use contrast. It needs to be timed well using a certain protocol. So likely best if you go somewhere that does these. And the idea here, at least from the the talk I had heard, um, what you're tr- they don't use it to screen because in one of our earlier podcasts we has discussed how it's a theory is the calcified plaques don't rupture. It's a soft plaque. Calcium is the hard plaque where calcium has kind of done the scaffolding work and it will not move. But then there's this soft, mysterious plaque that doesn't show up on CT scans, but shows up in imaging otherwise in terms of when you're using it, when the doctor's going, poking dye into your heart directly and seeing the narrowing of the vessels. So there you can see the narrowing and you can infer when you have, an artery that's going kind of wide and then it narrows and then widens again. You know there is a narrowing, but there's no calcium, so you know there's a soft plaque there. So you can infer that. And if you screen for that, if you start doing these studies that are more expensive, a lot more expensive, thousands of dollars, a lot more radiation, and you start screening for these, the ethical dilemma is nobody knows what to do with this
Right.
information. Um, you, I mean, you'll still be what doing lifestyle changes. I mean, do you stent? Do you put a stent in because there's a narrowing that's not calcified? Every test, every study that has been done on things like this, where people stent lesions that don't really um, cause any symptoms, has shown that there was no improvement of anything.
And you
Uh,
have to be on. Oftentimes, you have to be on antiplatelet therapy, and
because there's a stent. So now you
because
put a
there's a
stent, so you
stent.
have to
Yeah.
put antiplatelet therapy, and now created a disease where there was none. You created a new
Right. Yeah.
risk when there was none.
Right.
So that's where this CT and geography are risky business when your goal is to screen. Where they are using them is when you actually have symptoms. When you're like you walk, you have chest pain, and uh, a doctor can reasonably think, well, this sounds awful like angina, which is a medical word to say, your heart is demanding blood flow that cannot be delivered because of a big lesion, and that's why the heart is stressing out and giving you chest pain. So if you're exerting yourself and not able to do things and getting chest pain, you may have a narrowing, a plaque in one of your coronary arteries, which are blood vessels that feed the heart. And but when you stop moving or exerting yourself, the pain goes away. This is called stable angina. This is not necessarily an emergency, but it's stable because you can make the pain go away just by undoing what was eliciting the pain. By bringing the heart back to rest, the pain goes away. The traditional tests have been stress tests where either we measure the electrical activity through the EKG at rest and we make you work out on a treadmill and then we see the difference on the electricity flowing to the heart, or we see how the muscle is behaving in the heart through an echocardiogram where we look through ultrasound, look at the heart muscle at rest, or with a medication that makes the heart beat faster, and we can see the changes in the muscle under stress. Or we can look through blood flow through a nuclear perfusion scan or nuclear stress test, where again we look at the rest, how the blood is flowing, and then we make the heart go through a stressful event through a medication, and then we see how the blood is flowing because under stress, the the way the blood flows changes just because the demand is so high. And then the cardiologist would read these scans and tell you, yeah, you sounds like there is an area that is at risk of not receiving a lot of blood flow that is needed during the exercise periods. And then you may be referred to get a proper cath where they take you to a cath lab. They go through your groin or your wrist, enter the heart, and find the lesion and put a stent in it with the idea, with the hope that after the stent will undo that plugging, the plumbing issue, and now when you are not able to walk 2 blocks, you can run a mile. So the idea is they give that we want to go through all this to be able to give you function back. You know, you, that if we did the stent and you still have no improvement, then in reality that whole procedure, that whole ordeal was useless. So CT angiography kind of maybe replacing these kind of stress tests where you have this person who has stable angina, they're not having a plaque rupture, they're not dying, but they have this kind of, I walk and I get chest pain, I start walking, the pain goes away. Okay, let's now look at your CT angiography. Okay, let's study, why you're having this chest pain, because now we have context to give meaning to any narrowing we see. We know that this could actually possibly be a target to help the symptom. It's not just about the narrowing to make the pictures prettier. It's the hope that the person will actually have a better life. And that's if we focus on that, then it's worth it to spend thousands of dollars and do the radiation. So and if they don't find a narrowing and they're having chest pain, then now you just save somebody from going to the cath lab and doing all this crazy stuff. So that's the goal. So for screening, for in a young person who wants to be aggressive, you can screen them to see if it makes sense. Again, and you screen them if you think it will be actually helpful. And again, in the older person, you can offer them screening, hoping for a negative test so you can take them off the medications. There are other things to do if you want to not have a heart attack. Number one being don't smoke. If you're worried about these things, you want to screen for a heart attack and you're smoking, like it doesn't matter what the scan shows. It could be clean, it could have calcium. And if you're going to take the medication and smoke, it doesn't. Like, you just miss the whole point. If there are multiple variables that come together to give you a heart attack, smoking is one of the strongest variables you need to control.
Right.
And then I would say the cardiologist who had given this talk, he said this calcium score in terms of all the variables is actually sits higher. It's more important than the lipid panel. So what
Hmm.
LDL tells you is less important than what this scan can tell you.
Hmm.
But
Do you extrapolate that to mean if you like what's going on in the heart is also going on in the rest of the body, or because you could have atherosclerosis going on throughout the body, and I guess theoretically, I would assume that people who have it going on, in the femoral artery, the tibial, the popliteal, those people have a higher chance of also have it going on in the heart. Is he saying, like, is that kind of extrapolation from that
I
if
think
your
he's
heart is
saying
clean?
high LDL, or to use your terminology, high ApoB, is likely a risk factor. He doesn't talk about
Mm,
ApoB, but I mean, high LDL is likely a risk factor. But given the clinical context and somebody who is higher risk, you are uh, more likely just to see the calcium. And it means so much more to see the calcium also than to just see a high LDL. I think there's more variation in LDL, but when there's calcium in your coronaries, that tells you your body's going through atherosclerosis. Like,
gotcha.
because you can actually just see it. There's no
Yeah, right.
high LDL is just still I mean, if you have 100 people with high LDL, not all of them will have atherosclerosis. But if you have
Right.
100 people with high calcium scores, all of them have atherosclerosis. Like that's the difference.
But yeah.
So I think a lipid panel is still important. I don't think it's stupid, but and I think patient selection is important. Like if you have somebody who has risk factors, then and who's young, then even if they have normal LDL, but they really want to do the right thing and take a statin if they if they think it'll help and they have normal LDL, but they have family history, or maybe they have diabetes, but they take their torvastatin or whatever, keep the LDL real low. Type 1 diabetes, I think that's a good person to get this test just to see if something else can be done, statins or maybe more advanced therapies. Get apo, little a, the apolipoprotein, lipoprotein little a. That's also a very strong. Not everybody has it. It's a more of a rare marker. It's a pretty strong marker. If you have it, then you're gonna be. It may be more important than the calcium score if it's positive. If it's positive, I don't think the calcium score means a whole lot anymore. Like if it's
Right.
positive, you just need to do everything because you just got to work harder. Again, I mean, diabetes by itself, in medicine, we say if you have diabetes, you have heart disease. I mean, stop even looking. If you have diabetes, you have soft plaque, hard plaque, you have all sorts of plaques everywhere just by
Right.
having diabetes. There's no point in looking because if you look and it's negative, the test is wrong. You have plaque.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I hope that makes sense. So, based on this, would you get us a calcium score, Kevin?
Would I get one?
Kevin.
Sounds like I don't need one if I'm. Well, I guess I'm 39, so I'm getting close to that age. I don't family history. My um, my maternal grandmother died of heart attack in her. It was either 70 or 69, something like that. Otherwise, stroke. My dad's mom had a stroke in her 80s, late 80s, 90s. So I don't know. I don't think I have a huge family
Pretest
history
probability,
of.
or yeah, I guess you live a healthy
So
lifestyle, so you probably don't have diabetes, you don't have any of these things.
right.
Um, yeah, and you're still in your
Uh,
30s. Maybe when you're 40s, I think the cutoff that the cardiologist was using was like 40 to 75. It was his cutoff. He doesn't offer this test outside of those ranges. I think if you
I mean,
reach,
I'm all about data.
yeah,
I'll take it if somebody would offer it, but I don't know that I would.
again, if it's negative, it just doesn't mean you can still repeat it. I mean, nobody's stopping you from repeating every 10 years, maybe 5 years if you're really aggressive. And it's not that much radiation, so you could give yourself a present at 40th birthday.
Along with
The
that
only thing you,
colonoscopy.
yeah, you get a bundle deal. Uh, but only thing missing would be you would need to add medication for red yeast rice or some sort of
I'm ready to do that anyways.
exactly.
Fucking
So I don't
ApoB
think
is
that's
too
gonna
high.
stop you from. So again, will it change management? I don't know if it will for you. You're like itching to take
Uh,
something.
I mean, yeah. Do they ever see these? I mean, these plaques. If they do them when you're screened for it, positive. Let's say you start somebody on medication. Do they repeat it in 5 years to look for any progression, or do they? Is there any like
So in the calcium score,
repeat?
once you have a positive test, there's no need in repeating. Just, I mean, the whole point is it's pretty much a binary test. You're trying to figure out, do you have end stage kind of mature plaques or you don't. If you
Okay.
do, You got one, you got it's like cockroaches, right? You see one, you got others, and if you don't see
Right.
anywhere around the heart, apparently that's big enough that I mean, if your heart, that's a muscle that's working 24/7, year after year, that if it survived all this wear and tear through blood flow, then other parts of your body probably don't either. So I
Yeah.
think that's a fair. But yeah, I mean, I would say if I think 5 years for somebody aggressive, I think that's reasonable if you want to repeat it, and if you're going to be average, maybe every 10 years, kind of like colonoscopy. Those are the recommendations we give there. But once it's positive, then there's no point. I still feel because I still feel in my heart that the soft plaque is what ruptures. So if
You
we
feel it in
could,
your heart. Is that a?
but
It's a good reference.
but I don't know if you could have like some sort of MRI scan that's like doesn't have the radiation, and for some reason it's like $50, hypothetical, a $50 MRI based test that tells you if you have soft plaque or not. And with the promise that if you do have it, you're not going to freak out. You're not going to be like, you don't have any symptoms. You're not going to become anxious and ruin your sleep. And the extra stress will actually give you a heart attack. Like, like
Right.
if you are mentally strong to do that, I might
Yeah.
actually get that just purely to study my own body. This just academic. And not just me. I
Right.
want to do it for like thousands of people just to see what's going on around me, and then
Right.
follow them for I don't know, maybe 20 years and see how many people actually get a heart attack. So that's the deal. Calcium, coronary calcium score, getting more and more mainstream for screening with the goal of preventing heart attacks. Don't get too eager and just get it every year because that's just stupid. Um, but be reasonable. If you got risk factors, it's a decent tool to help you decide if you are ready for
Hmm.
big life change. If you're on the fence, hey, do you want to stop smoking or not? Hey, once you see the calcium, it looks scary. If you see calcium, let's see. I mean, um, there you go. I'm just plagiarizing different websites in the name of education. I mean, here you see this calcium. It's kind of, I think I think it's calcium. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's there. It gives you the sense of, man, I gotta do something different,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I think it it can make people stop smoking all of a sudden. It can really make somebody turn their behavior, make big behavior changes, lifestyle changes.
It's like the CGM, seeing the
Yeah,
spikes.
yeah, it means something inherently.
All
So,
right.
all
Nice.
right, that's all I had. Did you? So that's our yeah. Do you have any questions on this topic?
I don't think so.
All right. Do we have any other stories or news stories? Because I tried to find some AI stuff and I couldn't decide because there's so much now that every company to me sounds the same.
I just have one question for you.
Yes, yes. One question.
Is what do you think about this being a bubble?
Tell
And when
me.
is it going to pop?
Okay. Be more specific. What is a bubble? Are we talking about
the
health? Are
eight
we
the
talking
eight
about?
trillion dollars in market capitalization since 2020, since ChatGPT came out. That bubble.
Okay, so this is not. This is a bigger question than health. This is a.
No,
This
it has
is
nothing to do with health.
this is
This is
an.
chat. This is AI.
This is AI and I guess our podcast is maybe more health and AI. Yeah.
Hey, it's gonna AI is finding its way into the healthcare industry. We're just on the
Okay.
cutting edge.
So this is all I don't know. People who only care about health and don't care about economics, I guess they can tune out. But
Oh,
this,
but
this is
the
also fascinating.
Oracle made
Cerner.
it has some deal with Nvidia,
Oh, everybody has a
and
deal with Nvidia. Whoever
well,
doesn't
I'm
have a deal
sure,
with Nvidia is like,
but but this was like headline deal. So like, which I get your point, but like the CEO, I think, of Oracle, I think I talked to you about this, was who bought Cerner back in whenever 2021. He's a believer in transforming the EMR. I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
so I don't know any particular deal other than everybody wants these NVIDIA GPUs because they can create beautiful tokens, which can be used to uh, um, basically create different AI applications. So the market cap you're saying, all the market cap has been added is to the tech companies, the big tech.
Right,
Um,
right.
Microsoft, Nvidia is like the biggest one now. So yeah, I mean, from the all-time high in like 20, like the COVID bubble, whatever, we are above it, but we're not crazy amount above it. So to is it all hype? I don't think it's all hype because it actually has utility.
It's not. Yeah, it's not all. I don't think the argument is it's all hype. I think it's like the argument is it's like the .com bubble.
I don't think
There
it's
was
anywhere
obviously great
close.
utility in the internet, but there was still a bubble that popped.
So it is a. I think I can hear your
You get.
child.
Oh, sorry,
No,
my
that's fine. It's fine. It's
kid
fine.
is.
But I think the difference between the dot com bubble was riddled with um, companies like pet.com. I don't know, all these dot coms that didn't, even what they did was unclear. The hype was, well, it is a dot com, therefore I need to invest in it, and if I don't, every day I sit outside not investing, I'm losing money, and my idiot neighbor who did invest is getting richer and richer and richer on this thing that nobody understands. But it doesn't really matter because it's the future. That is the bubble mindset, and I think we had that in
I think
2021.
there's a parallel. That there's some parallel. I don't think everybody understands
For
large
most
language
people,
models.
yeah, but for most people, the big companies that people get invested in AI are the big tech companies: Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, Amazon, and some AMD. Some these kind of big tech companies, and all of them have great business models that are already profitable, and they can actually increase their productivity. There's so much promise. It's nothing is certain, but these are not um, empty companies. These are established behemoths that run the
But I
world.
but I think there's. I mean, I agree with that. I think there are other companies that are
They're
take
more
a like a
wishy-washy.
Walmart or just like these other smaller companies. And Walmart's not a small company, but like there are other companies that are like a lot of people and a lot of companies are thinking, how can I use this to to do X for my company. If I'm not in this space with my company, then I'm losing ground. I think that's happening not with just the big tech companies, happening with smaller or like
There's
other
a
non
rush.
tech companies.
I think the only bubble is in the companies that are private, and you and I cannot invest in this. A normal person cannot invest in these companies. I'm talking about that any website that's like somethingai.com, something.ai. There are like millions of .ai companies now that thankfully are not public, that venture capitalists, that have a lot of money, that like to invest in startups, they can play around with them, and a lot of them will go to zero. I think a lot of the value actually probably be um, kind of taken up by these big tech companies that are part of the index that most people can invest in. So most people who are investing in These kind of companies, Microsoft, phenomenal company, will do just fine. But to answer your question about these non-tech companies like Walmart, Starbucks, Target, I don't know, oil companies, energy, that are all thinking AI might be the solution. I think depends what they want to do. If they want to, like Walmart or Chase, if they want to use AI to improve their customer support, I think that's they can actually get a lot of value by having smarter chatbot. I mean, how many of these companies have like apps, or you can chat with an agent, but whatever question you have, like they just don't know. You ultimately do have to talk to somebody, and it takes multiple efforts. But if you could just that if that chatbot actually worked and gave you the answer and could understand you at the language level, not just if this else, do this if then statements and kind of stupid thinking. If they could actually understand your request and execute, I think that's a great game changer. I mean, from Walmart's point of Walmart's already run so efficiently. Like I can't imagine how where there will be room to cut cost in Walmart outside of like putting more self checkout than, I don't know, giving more insulation so they save on their electricity costs. Um, Maybe an AI could optimize the supply chain, could show them how to optimize that further. But I can imagine an operation like Walmart having much room to save pennies on. I mean, they
Well,
try
that's
to
what.
do that with their healthcare. Oh, there's a healthcare topic. Walmart Health, like Amazon Health. Um, they employ so many people and old people Walmart that they actually had a, this is a tangent, they had a health kind of startup within Walmart that they're going to use
Really?
to kind of reduce their own healthcare costs, because again they're such a low margin business, they're trying to cut cost, and
Oh,
healthcare is a big expense within
for their
Walmart for their
employees, you
employees.
mean?
Correct.
I see.
And once they could figure that out, then they could offer it to outside. I think that's what Amazon did, but Amazon employees are much younger than an average Walmart employee. But Walmart decided they were losing tons of money, so they just killed the whole thing, like
Mm.
like a month ago, maybe. So that was kind of sad. I was kind of hoping they could, you know, innovate something cool. But anyway, so I don't think Walmart has a lot of margin, but I can see companies like Fidelity or bank, other like financial, they have a lot of data that's confidential, and they want to be able to serve their customers, um, answer their queries, save on human cost. I mean, healthcare is a great example. I mean, how many inefficiencies. This is a gift because healthcare was so far behind on the tech stack where we're using faxes and all this stuff. Now you have technology that can be like, all your sins are forgiven. You can just, you know,
Mm.
we can read pictures, we can listen to, people speaking, and we'll give you beautiful meaning and, helpful tools. You don't have to do anything. Every other tech company is like having to upgrade from their servers from CPUs to GPUs, and healthcare is gonna has this opportunity to leapfrog into the next generation, in my opinion. And I mean, think about all the things we don't measure that should be measured in terms of outcomes and processes. And I mean, why not have every patient? If you give a patient an option of, hey, since you're here, we could measure your heart through a telemonitor while you're sleeping because you're at risk of having an arrhythmia and dying. Though we could also put a camera in your room that can actually real time look at you, and if you're demented and can't press the button, it will see that you need help and alert the nurse. Would you be okay with that, or is the lack of privacy really a big thing for you when you have kind of signed your life away in a way to come to this hospital because you're sick? Is do you consider this camera to be an unnecessary surveillance, or a really helpful alarm system? I think most patients would be like, yeah, put the camera in. Like, I'm
Right.
80, like, like, or the family members, like, oh, my mom has dementia. Like, I don't want her, confused in her room if she needs help. Like, yeah, put
Yeah.
whatever alarm, and it's gonna be super cheap to run. So I think there's so many ways to improve, and I can think a lot of use cases in healthcare because I'm in healthcare, so I don't know the niche use cases in other industries. But yeah, so I think AI is probably underhyped in terms of what is possible. We just don't
Mm.
know who will be at the top, but yeah. So I think that's the. I mean, if I knew who would be at the top, then I could probably make billions of dollars. But I'd rather make podcasts. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
I've got
You get some company.
some things going on.
That's fair.
All right. Well, I'm gonna shorten video at the end of the year,
Do
and
not do that.
we'll see what happens.
All right. All right. Till another time. Over and out.